Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of the hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Afghanistan's top peace negotiator Abdullah has accused the Taliban of not fulfilling their commitment to a reduction in violence. However, in an interview, he hoped the UN-led Istanbul meeting would help promote Afghan peace negotiations. Meanwhile, the Taliban have blamed the Kabul administration for killing 20 civilians in Eastern Khost province. In Bangladesh, dozens of people have been injured during violent protests against Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the country. Clashes between police and protesters erupted during a nationwide strike over killing of 10 people in anti-Modi demonstrations. Earlier, the demonstrators blocked the main roads and railway tracks in different cities. Indian forces have martyred 2 civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Shopian district. The youths were targeted during a siege and search operation in Wangam area of the district. The occupying troops have killed more than 300 people in the occupied valley during the 600-day siege. The Arab coalition says it has destroyed 2 explosive-laden boats of Yemen's Houthi rebels and 2 drones. The coalition said the boats were to be used in an attack from the Hudaydah port, while the drones were aimed at south of the kingdom. It comes days after US Special Envoy Tim Landerking returned to the region to push for a nationwide ceasefire. Brazil has recorded nearly 3,500 COVID-19 deaths for the second day in a row and close to 86,000 infections. In Pakistan, daily cases hit a 10-month high, with almost 4,800 people tested positive and 57 died overnight. The virus has infected more than 126 million people, claiming at least 2.7 million lives around the world. And in tennis, Russia's Andrei Rublev and Canada's Denis Shapovalov have breezed into the 3rd round of the Miami Open. Rublev beat American tennis Sandgren 6-1 and 6-2 to advance ahead. Meanwhile, Shapovalov came from a set down to defeat Belarusian Elia Ivashka 6-7, 6-4 and 6-4. These were top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, Afghanistan's top peace negotiator Abdullah has accused the Taliban of not fulfilling their commitment to a reduction in violence. Abdullah says it will be a big miscalculation if the Taliban think they can overrun the country by war after the withdrawal of US troops. In an interview, Abdullah said, "For successful negotiations, the ceasefire is not a precondition, but an absolute necessity." On the 1st of May deadline of US pullout, he said the Doha deal is conditional. Abdullah said the US committed to withdrawing troops in return for the Taliban agreeing to reduce violence significantly. He added, if both sides do not utilize the opportunity of inclusive peaceful settlement, there is a risk of war continuation. Meanwhile, the Taliban have blamed the Kabul administration for killing 20 civilians in Eastern Khost province. In a statement, the group called on the UN mission to impartially investigate this civilian massacre and punish the perpetrators. Now, in Bangladesh, dozens of people have been injured during violent protests against Indian Prime Minister Modi's visit to the country. Clashes between police and protesters erupted during a nationwide strike over killing of 10 people in anti-Modi demonstrations. Police used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the protesters in Narayanganj city. The demonstrators took to the streets at Shimrail, Mochak, Mandanpur and signboard areas in the city. Earlier, the protesters blocked the main roads and railway tracks in different cities. During Modi's visit, the protesters criticized his anti-Muslim policies and called him the butcher of Gujarat. Meanwhile, Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Shopian district. The occupying troops have killed more than 300 people in the occupied valley during the 600-day siege. The youths were targeted during a siege in the Vangam area of the district. Indian troops held the entire population of the area hostage in one of its inhumane so-called cordon and search operations. They are carrying out house-to-house search in the area. The military operation was going on till the last reports came in. All parties Hurriyat Conference said India is trying to suppress the Kashmiri struggle for right to self-determination through violence. Now, the top military leaders from the United States and its allies have slammed the violence by Myanmar's military in a joint statement. 12 countries around the world, including Asia and Europe, have signed a rare declaration. They condemned the use of lethal violence against unarmed civilians and said the army must work to restore its lost credibility. Meanwhile, the activists pledged to continue protests after the army killed over 100 people yesterday. So far, more than 440 civilians have been killed since the army seized power on the 1st of February. Moving on now, the Arab coalition says it has destroyed 2 explosive-laden boats of Yemen's Houthi rebels and 2 drones. The coalition says it is taking the necessary operational measures in accordance with international humanitarian law. In a statement, the coalition said the boats were to be used in an attack from the Hudaydah port. It added the drones were aimed at southern cities of Saudi Arabia. This comes days after U.S. Special Envoy Tim Lander-King returned to the region to push for a nationwide ceasefire. Now, 2 suspected suicide bomb blasts have rocked a Catholic church in the Indonesian city of Makassar. The police said 14 people have been wounded in the explosions which come on the first day of the Easter Holy Week. A police spokesperson said there was a congregation underway inside the church when the blast occurred. Talking to the media, the spokesperson said 2 suspected bombers are believed to be the only fatalities. Police said authorities are looking into which radical networks the bombers came from. They said authorities are investigating whether the attack was linked to recent arrests of suspected militants. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Meanwhile, Brazil has recorded nearly 3,500 COVID-19 deaths for the 2nd day in a row and close to 86,000 infections. Globally, the virus has infected more than 126 million people, claiming at least 2.7 million lives. More on the pandemic in this report. The governments around the world seem to be in a race to administer maximum vaccine doses and bring their countries back to normalcy. Health officials have rolled out more than 510 million coronavirus vaccine doses globally, but the deployment of jabs has been glaringly unequal, with the US accounting for more than a quarter of the global total. More than 50 million people in the United States have been fully vaccinated, while about 97.7 million have received at least 1 dose. Still, the country's tallies of new COVID-19 cases and deaths have started creeping up in the last few days. In the south, experts warn Brazil's coronavirus situation is likely to deteriorate more as they forecast the nation's death toll will pass the US by the end of the year. But in Sao Paulo, young Brazilians find it hard to stay at home or maintain distances, forcing police actions.
This
is yet another operation to raise awareness among these young people that they should not crowd together in times of the contagion. We are going through a very difficult period lacking ICU beds, and these young people insist on going out to have fun.
In Europe, the situation appears to be improving for the United Kingdom as the NHS has passed the milestone of administering 25 million first vaccine doses, while over 2.5 million people have now received their 2nd dose. But France admits the situation is critical and added 3 more departments to the 16 already under tight restrictions. In once hard-hit Spain, some 5,000 music fans in Barcelona attended a rock concert after rapid COVID-19 tests. Health authorities approved the trial, which, if successful, could provide a route to recovery for the ravaged live music industry in Spain and beyond.
I believe that today we have made one thing a reality, which was to show the world that culture is safe, that things can be done well, and by doing them well, concerts like this, one of 5,000 people, can be carried out, which has been perfect at all times in safety and in quality.
The Philippines say it will reimpose tougher measures in the capital of Manila and nearby provinces in order to fight a surge in the infections. Meanwhile, Hong Kong says an initial investigation by Germany's BioNTech into its vaccine did not show any obvious systemic factors during packaging. The use of the vaccine was suspended in the city and neighboring Macau this week. Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 57 more deaths and over 4,700 coronavirus cases in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry reported over 4,000 daily cases for the fourth consecutive day. The country's death toll has reached 14,215. More than 654,000 people have tested positive in Pakistan, of which over 595,000 have recovered. The number of active cases in the country has crossed 44,000. The Health Ministry said over 3,000 people are in critical condition across the country. Hindus across the world are celebrating their cultural and religious festival of Holi today. The event signifies the triumph of good over evil and is also known as the Festival of Spring. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has greeted the country's Hindu community on the occasion. In Pakistan, Hindus are celebrating the day amid strict observance of COVID-19 protocols. Meanwhile, in India, this year's celebrations are being seen with skepticism as gatherings disregard the record spike in infections. The country has recorded nearly 63,000 cases overnight, the highest single-day tally since mid-October last year. The Health Ministry said with 312 deaths, single-day mortality figures were also at their highest since Christmas. Now, some of the world's most iconic landmarks plunged into darkness to mark this year's Earth Hour. The Worldwide Fund for Nature started the event in Sydney in 2007. Earth Hour is now one of the world's largest grassroots movements for the environment. This year's event highlights the link between the destruction of nature and increasing outbreaks of diseases like COVID-19. In Pakistan, Prime Minister office turned off its light to reiterate the country's commitment to preserving nature. Famous landmarks in cities such as Athens, Rome, Berlin and Rio de Janeiro also turned off their lights. People filmed and cheered as the lights went out in Moscow's Red Square and the iconic Eiffel Tower in Paris. In Berlin, an activist dressed as a giant panda, which is the symbol of the WWF, switched off the lights on the city's Brandenburg Gate. Now, China's capital, Beijing, has been shrouded in thick dust carrying extremely high levels of hazard particles. Climatologists say the second sandstorm in 2 weeks is due to the winds from drought-hit Mongolia and northwestern China. The storm reduced visibility and forced pedestrians to cover their eyes as gusts of dust swept through the streets. Beijing's official air quality index reached a maximum level of 500. Earlier, China's Met administration issued a yellow alert for Beijing, warning the city of the sandstorm. The Met office says Beijing might face more sandstorm in April due to unfavorable weather. Now, Egypt has set up multiple rescue plans to dislodge the giant container ship blocking the Suez Canal. Osama Rabi, chairman of the Suez Canal authorities, says it remains unclear when the vessel will be refloated. At a press conference, Rabi said 14 tugboats are trying to dislodge the stranded vessel named Ever Given. He said the stern had begun to move on Friday night and that the rudder and propeller had started working again. Some 9,000 tons of ballast water stored in tanks to stabilize the ship has been removed to help lighten the vessel. He added that work is underway around the clock to get other ships through. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The United States has called for the release of former interim Bolivian President Jeanine Áñez and 2 of her former ministers. This comes after a Bolivian judge ordered 4-month detention of Inés following her arrest on charges linked to the ouster of leader Evo Morales. In a statement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. is concerned about the anti-democratic behavior in Bolivia. He urged the government to support peace and democracy by releasing the detained former officials. Blinken noted that the European Union and international rights bodies have also expressed concerns over the arrest. The Secretary of State has called for an independent and transparent probe into human rights violations in Bolivia. Now, at least one person has died and several others are wounded in a stabbing at a public library in the Canadian city of Vancouver. In a tweet, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said they have taken a suspect into custody. The police said the suspect apparently acted alone and they are still looking for potential additional victims. They said multiple victims were stabbed inside and outside the North Vancouver Library. The police added there is no ongoing threat to the public. According to emergency services officials, 6 people were taken to the hospital. Now, Facebook has frozen Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's page over misinformation about COVID-19. Earlier, without providing any evidence, Maduro claimed he has some remedy to cure the disease. Facebook has also taken down a video in which Maduro promotes a medication to cure the virus. The company said it follows guidance from the WHO that says there is currently no medication to cure the virus. A spokesperson said due to repeated violations of rules, they have frozen the page for 30 days, during which it will be read only. Venezuela has so far reported over 1,500 deaths from COVID-19 with nearly 155,000 cases. Now, an antique 15th century altarpiece has been finally restored after a decade-long process costing millions of dollars. It has been put into a permanent exhibition at St. Bavo's Cathedral in Belgian city, Ghent. Details in this report.
From 2 world wars to 16th century iconoclasm and multiple thefts, this artwork has survived centuries of turmoil. Now it has gained a new bulletproof glass housing in Belgium as part of a $35.4 million revamp for visitors. The renowned Adoration of the Mystic Lamb was completed in 1432 by brothers Jan and Hubert van Eyck and is widely considered one of the most important pieces of early Renaissance art. The 12-paneled altarpiece has been put on display at the same cathedral in Belgium where it first stood after its completion. The visitors will pass through the crypt before viewing the panels, as an augmented reality experience will relate the piece's 600-year history. To accommodate tourists, the altarpiece is now exhibited in a larger chapel.
In business stories, most major stocks in the Gulf have gained as hopes for a global economic recovery boosts investor sentiment. The Dubai share index led the gains, ascending nearly 0.5%. Benchmark indices of Saudi Arabia, Qatar gained marginally. Abu Dhabi's bourses traded fractionally above the flat line, was mostly flat. Kuwait's premier index drifted slightly lower, with the National Industries Group slipping. And with that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.